I love my family. I just want to do my own thing.
I don't think you can understand Michael Jackson as a human being unless you went back.
When a director makes a movie about Michael Jackson, he isn't just making another music biopic. He's stepping into one of the most powerful and complicated legacies in entertainment history. And now, Antoine Fuqua has finally opened up about how he plans to portray Michael on screen. What's interesting is what he didn't focus on. He didn't start with scandals or tabloid headlines. Instead, he spoke about spirituality, humanity, family, identity, and the way Michael connected with the world through movement and music. That tells us something important. This may not be the kind of biopic people are expecting. So the real question is this: what kind of movie is Antoine Fuqua actually building? A flashy performance-driven spectacle? A safe, polished tribute? Or a deeper and more emotional portrait of the man behind the icon? To understand that, we need to start with the very first thing he said about this film. He called it a spiritual journey. One of the first things Antoine Fuqua said about making this film was that it feels like a spiritual journey. That's a very specific choice of words. He didn't say it's exciting. He didn't say it's challenging. He didn't say it's a big production. He said spiritual. That immediately tells us the tone of this movie may be more emotional and reflective than explosive. A spiritual journey suggests something deeper than fame and performance. It suggests inner conflict, purpose, light and darkness, and the weight of being different. Michael Jackson was never just an entertainer. For millions of people, he felt larger than life, almost mythical. Fuqua even said that when he watched Michael on television, he was always larger than life. So from a cinematic point of view, this makes sense. We may not just see concerts and rehearsals. We might see moments that feel symbolic, intimate, even quiet. Scenes that focus on Michael alone, thinking, creating, struggling. A spiritual tone also means the film could slow down in certain places instead of rushing from one hit song to the next. That's important, because if this movie leans into spirituality, it won't just show us what Michael did. It will try to show us who he believed he was and what he was searching for. And that changes the entire emotional weight of the film. But spirituality is only one layer of what Fuqua revealed. The next thing he said tells us even more about the message this movie might carry. He talked about how Michael refused to be put in a box. Antoine Fuqua made it clear that one of the biggest things Michael Jackson represented to him was breaking out of limitations. He said Michael refused to be put in a box as just a black artist. That statement is powerful, and it tells us a lot about how this film might frame Michael's rise. This won't just be a story about a talented singer becoming famous. It may focus heavily on how Michael crossed boundaries that were very real at the time. In the early 1980s, the music industry was divided. MTV barely played black artists. Radio formats were separated. There were invisible ceilings. And then Michael Jackson shattered them. If Fuqua leans into this angle, the movie could highlight the cultural revolution behind Thriller, the global crossover, and the pressure that came with becoming the biggest star on the planet. This also affects the scale of the film. If the focus is on breaking barriers, we may see international reactions, massive crowds, and the feeling of the world watching him at the same time. It becomes bigger than America, bigger than pop music. It becomes about identity and representation. And because Fuqua personally connects to that struggle of not being boxed in, this part of the story may feel especially authentic. It won't just be historical, it will feel personal. But breaking barriers wasn't the only conflict in Michael's life. Fuqua also pointed to something much more intimate. He mentioned the tension between Michael's love for his family and his love for his music. And that might be where the real emotional weight of this film lives. At one point, we hear the line, "The Jackson family is the brand, that's our Coca-Cola." And this is important. That line isn't Antoine Fuqua speaking in the interview. It's a line from the film itself, spoken through the character of Joe Jackson. But the fact that this line exists in the script tells us something very serious about the direction of this biopic. Comparing a family to Coca-Cola is not emotional language. It's business language. It's branding language. It suggests that from the very beginning, the Jackson name was not just about music. It was about market value, image, control, and long-term strategy. And if the film includes dialogue like this, that means it may not shy away from showing the pressure behind the scenes. This connects directly to what Fuqua said about Michael struggling between his love for his family and his love for his music. That tension is powerful. On one side, loyalty and history. On the other side, personal identity and artistic freedom. If handled correctly, this could give us some of the most emotionally complex scenes in the entire movie. Not just applause and stadium lights, but private conversations, hard decisions, and moments of conflict. And when you understand that pressure, Michael's performances start to look different, because according to Fuqua, his moves were not random. They were a conversation, a connection, a language between him and the audience. So now the question becomes, how will the film capture that energy on screen? Antoine Fuqua said something very interesting. He described Michael's moves as a conversation he was having with the audience. That's not a normal way to talk about choreography. Most directors would say the dances are iconic or technical or unforgettable, but calling it a conversation changes the meaning completely. A conversation means connection. It means response. It means emotion moving back and forth between the performer and the crowd. If the film truly embraces that idea, then the performance scenes won't just be recreations of famous routines. They won't feel like tribute acts. They'll feel alive. The camera might move with him instead of just watching him. We might see close-ups of his eyes, the sweat, the breath, the silence before the beat drops. Instead of cutting quickly from angle to angle, the film could hold on moments longer so we feel the tension building the same way a real audience would. This also tells us something about authenticity. If Fuqua sees Michael's movement as a language, then the actor playing him cannot just copy the steps. He has to understand the intention behind them, why he paused, why he turned, why he held still before exploding into motion. That emotional intelligence is what separates imitation from transformation. And if they get this right, the music scenes could become storytelling tools, not just visual highlights, because every moonwalk, every spin, every still moment on stage would represent something happening inside Michael at that point in his life. But even with all that spectacle and scale, Fuqua made one thing very clear. No matter how epic Michael's life was, the focus has to stay on the human being. Antoine Fuqua said something that might be the most important clue about this entire film. He said Michael's life was epic, but you still have to focus on the human being to understand who he really was. That statement tells us the movie is not trying to be just a greatest hits montage. It's not just about stadiums, records, and headlines. It's about the person behind all of that. Calling his life epic sets the scale. We're talking about global fame, cultural impact, and moments that changed music forever. But when you say you must focus on the human being, you're promising vulnerability. That means we could see doubt, loneliness, pressure, and the emotional cost of being larger than life. Because the bigger the legend, the heavier the weight. This balance is the hardest thing to achieve in a biopic. If you lean too much into the myth, the character feels distant and untouchable. If you lean too much into the struggles, you lose the magic that made him who he was. Fuqua seems to understand that tension. He wants audiences to walk out feeling like they understand Michael a little more. Not just as an icon, but as a person trying to navigate fame, family, identity, and purpose. And if that truly is the direction, then this film isn't just about showing us who Michael Jackson was on stage, it's about showing us who he was when the spotlight turned off. So when you really listen to what Antoine Fuqua is saying, this biopic starts to look very different from the usual formula. He keeps using words like spiritual, human, connection, struggle, and transcendence. That tells us this may not be a loud, scandal-driven movie designed to shock people. It may be a film that tries to reframe Michael Jackson as something more complex and more emotional than the headlines ever allowed. But here's the challenge. Making a movie about someone like Michael is almost impossible. If you make him too perfect, it feels fake. If you focus too much on controversy, it feels exploitative. If you lean too heavily into spectacle, you lose the soul. Fuqua seems aware of that balance. He's talking about scale, yes. He's talking about epic moments. But he keeps returning to the human being underneath it all. And maybe that's the real test of this film. Not whether the dance scenes are flawless. Not whether the sets look expensive. Not even whether the timeline is accurate. The real test is this. When the lights come back on in the theater, will people feel like they understand Michael Jackson just a little more than they did before? Because if this movie can do that, then it won't just be another biopic. It could become something much more powerful.